Hey there, welcome to today's yoga practice. It's Jackie Reeds from Rekindle You, and I'm happy to have you join me for this awesome on demand session. Today, you're going to want a yoga mat probably. Makes it a little more comfy for moving around. If you have blocks, foam blocks, cork blocks, whatever, they can be handy. I never quite know when I'll call them into use. So if you happen to have some around or you have something similar, books or anything else that you can use to help support you, then keep them close by. A strap will be helpful today. So if you have a strap or a belt, it could even be like the belt from a house coat or from a bathrobe or something like that. Or if you have a specific yoga strap, that works great too. To get started today, we're going to come back to the mat. We're going to start seated for a moment and then we'll move into Shavasana, which is our usual starting position. So just coming to sit however you like. It really depends on what feels good for your body. I don't do super well with sitting cross-legged. It's kind of really painful, so I'm going to sit on some blocks to give myself a little rest. I don't have as much pressure on my knees. So before we get into Shavasana, which is that laying down pose on your back, sort of letting loose a little bit, just want to find your way into this practice today and give you just a little information about it. So I recently changed the name of this practice from beginner vinyasa flow to just yoga, because the reality is that what we do during these sessions is very dependent on how I feel that day. You are at the will of my whim. So here we are. Today, I'd really like to focus on some grounding work. It is fall, and it is common in fall for people to feel a little more unsettled. The wind is stronger often. There's more rain. We're getting ready for winter. There's a lot of uncertainty sometimes around the darkness in winter and the cold, especially where I live up in Canada. And so that's why I'm thinking of grounding practice today. I also would like to do a lot of work on my back and on your back and laying down in general, and then also standing. And that's because so much of yoga seems to be dependent on the wrist. So much of the vinyasa flow that we think of, it's a lot of downward dog, it's a lot of chaturanga, so that's like yoga push-up, a lot of upward dog and cobra, things like that, a lot of pressure on the wrists. And I have a lot of issues with my wrists from years and years of figure skating and falling on my wrists all the time. And so sometimes they just need a break. And so today's one of those days where I'm feeling the fatigue in my wrists, and I'm just thinking today's a great day to stay off them. So we'll do a lot of standing postures and a lot of laying down postures. We'll do some work with hip mobility as well, just because a lot of us hold emotions in our hips, and I know I'm one of those, and so I could do with some work there. But we will work on some fluidity too. That was a bit of a long spiel. So to get us kind of centered back in, I'd love for you to sit up nice and tall as best you can where you are. And when I mean that, I just mean, I refer to this a lot, so I'm thinking the very base of your spine, like down to your tailbone, and then there's your pelvis, which is like a bowl, and then we have this rod that sticks up, our spine. Right? Some of us are lucky and have a straight spine, some of us aren't so lucky and it's a little bit wiggly. Well, whatever it is, our body knows how to stack ourselves. So even if you don't look perfectly stacked, I want you to feel stacked over top of yourself. And then we'll take your hands and just bring them to the middle of your forehead. And I just want you to sort of iron out your forehead, moving from center outwards towards your temples. And you can do this stroke as many times as you like, using the amount of pressure you like. So we're not trying to bore a hole in your head. But some people like a little more pressure. Some people like to go down by the brow bone where your eyebrows are. And just sort of smooth out the forehead. See if you can exhale as you do it. So take a breath in, and then as you exhale, spread your fingers apart from one another over towards the temples. All right, one last one like this. This time as you exhale, move yourself down to your temples, and then just some gentle circular massage down around your temples. I love to float down into my jaw here. Just turn so you can see a little better, I'm a bit far from the camera. Some circles around the jaw. I would imagine myself if I was a cat or a dog. I would love it if people would just rub around my jaw and my temples too. Not just the scratch behind the ears, but on the jaw and temples too. All right, taking a breath and run your fingers up and around, and then go around the back of your ears, sliding your hands down behind your ears, down your neck, and onto your upper traps. So I call these your coat hanger muscles because when I think of my coat hanger, it's kind of a triangular shape, and these top bits, I feel like we take a lot of the weight of our clothes, and they're kind of holding their clothes up, and that bottom rod, especially if you put pants or something on it and it's hanging over. Sorry to so many hand movements. But I feel like there's a lot of pressure on them to hold up. And so I feel that way sometimes in my upper traps, if they're holding up the rest of my body. And so I get some tension there. So let's take a moment and massage that out. Maybe you use sort of a squeezing motion where you're rubbing your fingers. Maybe it's a circular motion, whatever it is, go ahead and do it. If you want to walk your fingers up the back of your neck, rub the back of your neck as well, that's great. And then just place your hands over one another on the top of your chest, just around your collarbone. Take a breath in through your nose. Out through your mouth, if you can handle it with a sigh. You don't need to be embarrassed, you're probably in a room by yourself. Breath in. Sigh out. Funny, sighs used to be a thing that I never did because it was associated with like not feeling quite right, and people would always ask if I was okay, and I hated that, so I wouldn't sigh it through my mouth. So I encourage you to be brave with it, like I've learned to be. Breathe out through your mouth. Helps relax the muscles. All right, let's find our way into Shavasana now. So moving any props aside. You'll see I have a blanket folded on my mat, and that's because I just love having a little pillow behind my head. But find your way down. Maybe you have a pillow or a towel as well. Find your way onto your back. If you find that your neck is sort of tipped up like this, you can roll your towel or blanket to support your neck so that way you can change the position of your head and neck. That's great. Okay. So let's find your way into Shavasana. I love to take a nice wide Shavasana with my feet. See what feels good to you. You can experiment. Try having your feet together, moving them apart. Maybe your heels are as wide as your mat. See if you can adjust that your spine is laid pretty flat on the mat, and so that way you don't have a huge curve under your low back. It's normal to have some, but if you feel a lot, that might be too much pressure on your low back, that may be a sign that today is the day for you to plant your feet to let your low back press into the floor. If your legs are tired like that, you can heel toe them out wider and then let your knees collapse into one another and allow them to support one another as you sit there on that tented knees. With your hands, there's so many options. My two favorite ones are to have the hands splayed out, palms face up towards the ceiling, or my other favorite is to have hands on the belly or one on the heart and one on the belly. I like the arms out variation with palms up because it lets my shoulders roll back and rest on the mat more. But if my shoulders are really tight, that feels hard. And so on those days, I prefer to have my hands on my chest or my belly. And I find it reassuring to feel my breath move into my belly and into my hands. So play around with all these options, see what works for you. Maybe there's another option that I haven't named that really suits you today. There are no rules here, so take what works best for you. Take a few quiet breaths in and out. And by quiet, I mean quiet as I'm not going to keep talking so much. But feel free to be noisy with your breath. The other day, a good friend of mine posted a quote on Facebook. She always seems to find the good ones. And this one was from C.S. Lewis, the author of The Chronicles of Narnia, so that whole set. Maybe some other books. Sorry, I don't know the details. I have read that set. But the quote says something to the effect of, and I may be paraphrasing, that's how I do things. It says something to the effect of, you do not have a soul. You are a soul. You have a body. I'll say it again so it sinks in. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. You have a body. What strikes me about that quote is that I feel a lot of truth in it. That we all have this inner essence or a soul, and that we are given a body for this earth, but we are not the body. And while I know you're joining me today in the movement practice of the work that I do, I also have another aspect of my practice, which is nourishment and nutrition. And many of the folks that I'm working with are working with me because they need support around disordered eating or eating disorders or body image. And so this way of thinking about having the soul be the true part and the body being a vessel can be powerful for some. It can provide some relief. Just being able to have that little bit of distance between our true selves and the bodies we find ourselves in can be really liberating. Especially if the body that we live in isn't perhaps what we think we might have designed for ourselves had we been given the agency to do so. There's much to think about and talk about on this topic. And I'm going to leave it mostly there. But I'll invite you to think of it from this perspective today and during this practice. That we can use our movement practice, not our movement, our movement practice to really seep in to that body or that vessel. To let more of our true essence or our soul shine through. Not in a controlling or forcing sort of way, but in a playful way. People talk about how sometimes when they see someone, they'll say, oh, they were just glowing. And in my mind, I think of that as the time when the soul is most connected to the body. And it seems like it's shining right through. Take about 3 more really fulsome breaths. Inviting you to breathe in through your nose. To let the air fill your belly and your lungs. And then exhale through your mouth. Gonna start a little bit of a body wave here, and we can adjust this to match the way that you're starting, and your feet are planted or extended long. But I'm going to guide you as if you're stretched out long. So beginning to wiggle your toes. See if you can start with your pinky toes, with little baby toes. I know they don't move on their own, but if we imagine it, maybe one day we can do it. Spreading to your other toes, catching on. Bigger toes, all the way up to the big toes, starting to sort of point and flex your feet, but more of a wave. So it's like your feet are waving, doing a little like hello with wave, scrunching wave with the feet. Let that move into your ankles so your whole foot can rock forward and backward. Feel that movement, how it reverberates up in your calves, up towards your knee and your upper leg. Into your hips and bum, you can feel your bum sort of rubbing against the floor as you flop your feet forward and back. You can feel your low back moving now. Into your thoracic spine, more like your middle of your back and your rib cage. Higher up, you feel your shoulders kind of bouncing along. Can you move the movement down your arms, into your upper arm, your elbows and forearms. Now we've got the backs of our hands dancing against the mat. Fingers are moving. Go back up to the collarbone, feeling it move. Into your shoulders and neck, your chin. My jaw's been wagging this whole time. Maybe yours is too. Maybe you even practice style. Moving up, you can wiggle your ears, you can be wiggling them. Move your eyebrows. See if you can move your scalp. Everything's moving, and then pause. Pausing and then not holding your breath way, but in a just let the energy drain out sort of way. Draw the energy back in your body and get back to moving everything all at once again. And we'll take one more pause. I'm going to count down from 3, and you're going to let the energy sort of drain out again. You ready? 3, 2, 1, pause. Awesome. All right. Draw your feet onto the mat if they're not already there. Maybe readjust your low back. Maybe I'm always a little stiff after lying on it, to be truthful. And then draw your knees in towards your chest, giving them a squeeze in such a way that they draw a little bit closer. Maybe it's a noticeable difference, maybe it's not. You can gently rock side to side, massaging your sacrum, that sort of triangular pelvic bone. Rocking back and forth on the mat. Okay. If you'll indulge me, draw your knees in a little closer, sort of rounding your spine, chin to your chest. If you want to draw your nose up to your knees, feel free. Relax down if you've lifted your head. We're going to do a lying down version of cat-cow. So this, my friends, is now your cat. The balled up cat. Now to find your cow, release your feet. I like to do it one by one because it's just gentler on my low back. Down to the mat. Adjust your feet. We're going to be moving into a bridge. And so you want to have it so your knees are roughly over your ankles. You don't want them scooched in too far because your knees will hang over your toes. And you don't want them so far out that it feels like you've got these feet that aren't even supporting your legs, right? So find that spot. We can adjust as we go. Hands can come down alongside you, palms facing into the mat, and press your hips up towards the sky. Squeeze your bum. Adjust your feet if you need. Perhaps you imagine squeezing a ball between your knees. This is going to be your cow. Slowly release down vertebra by vertebra. Walk your knees into your chest, into your cat. Maybe your nose lifts. Maybe you keep your shoulders and head down on the mat. And then
walk your feet back down, press your hips up into your calf. Now, do you remember the breath that usually accompanies cat-cow in the practice? Generally, it's an inhale into cow, exhale into cat. So keeping that in mind, take a breath in as you transition. And as you find your way into your cat, and squeeze your knees closer to your body, exhale. As you float your feet back down to the mat and begin to press your hips up, take an inhale. And as they lower down and you roll back into your ball, exhale. Take 3 more rounds at your own pace. Pardon me while I clear my throat, because it will fall allergies. See if you can let it all be a chain reaction starting from your tailbone. It won't flow quite the same way as it would if you're on your hands and knees. But that's okay because we're not on our hands and knees. I've lost count. I'll do one more for good measure because I think I've only done 2. And once you've finished, you can land your feet down. Sweep your arm up underneath you. I'm going to be using my right arm, but I realize you may be laying opposite to me. So pick an arm and then roll over facing the camera, the computer, the TV, however you're doing this, so you can see me. And when you arrive here, I want you to bend your knees a little extra. And I want you to rock your top hip forward. So that when you look down, the top knee is a little further out. It's overhanging the bottom knee a little bit. If you want to keep your head down with this, you can, or you can prop it up. It's up to you. Glue your feet together and place your top hand on your top hip. We're going to do a couple of clamshells. So this is a movement I borrowed from my personal training side of my movement practice, but it's really valuable for firing up your glutes. And I want you to be firing on all cylinders today for this practice. So flex your toes a little bit as if your toes are drawing up towards your face, the opposite of pointing them. Glue them together and keeping that top hip rock forward a little bit. While you open your knees just a little bit, you can see just a crack of light coming between the knees. See if you can do about 5 of those. The hand there feels the muscles engage in your hip and your bum. It's a good reminder. Making sure that top is rolled forward so it doesn't become a low back exercise. Excellent. Now take your top leg and extend it down. You might have to unbend your bottom leg a little bit. Flex the toes of your long leg again. Pardon me. And I like to anchor my hand down here too. And now we're just going to lift and lower. Yes, we're doing some very like 80s, 90s exercises here. Called these lying abductors. Because we're waking up those abductor muscles, the ones that allow our leg to move away from the midline. Doing about 5 of these. Keeping a little softness in the knees so we don't overextend. Awesome. Okay, let's switch sides to the other side. We'll do the same thing. I'm guessing you're probably going to want to keep it so that you can see me. So just flipping over to the other side. If you're good at following the audio directions, you could just roll over and face the other direction. All right, so starting out with the clamshells. So find that position, knees are bent generously, sort of fetal position, top hip is rolled forward. Right, really important that it's rolled over, like as if you're gonna like cuddle something down there. You got this pillow you're cuddling, right? Okay, feet are glued together, soles of feet are facing out. I don't know why I said that. But your toes are flexed. All right, and then open that little book of your knees just gently. A little movement. Feeling that work in the hips and the bum. I've done 3, so I have 2 more. You're doing a total of 5.
And once you've done your 5, straighten your legs out a little bit. Top leg is pretty much all the way straight. Toes are flat, right? The opposite of pointing. Toes back towards the nose. And then we're lifting for 5 of these. Awesome. All right, you can roll over onto your back. Take a moment here. Let's do a revisit the glute bridge. So the same way we did our cow before, this time hands press down again. So let's lift your hips, squeeze your bum. See if you feel a little more strength and stability after doing those movements on your side. Really strong here, press the hips nice and high. And then gently lower down with control. Option here, we want you moving up. We're gonna find a standing position. So if you like to rock and roll to find seated, you can do that along the length of your spine, or you can roll over to a side and press up. I'm gonna rock and roll just to avoid my wrists a little more. But you do what feels right for you. Okay. Once you find a seated position, come on all the way up. I'm going to pause and take a sip of water. Oh, that feels good. Okay, come all the way up to stand. All right, a few just things, because it's a little bit hard to hear you through everything perfectly at every moment. Just a few sort of basic things. Let's find our way into Tadasana before we get started. Tadasana is a really awesome grounding standing posture. And so for it, the general rule is to put your feet about hip distance apart. Really, you just want to find them in a supportive space underneath your body. For some people, that's going to look pretty close. For some people, that's going to be pretty far apart. So kind of experiment with yourself. Maybe start out with your feet really close together and then move them apart until you feel really stable. If you go too far and you think that's not stable, then move it back in. Okay. Once you think you found your position for your feet, then tap your toes around, tap your heels, kind of root down, really feel into it. Okay, keep some softness in your knees. And then remember when you're doing those cat-cows or laying down modified ones with our hips. So see if you can kind of rock your pelvis, right? So sticking your bum out, tucking it under. Another thing is if you were a pet, like a cat or a dog, you have this tail, stick your tail out, hide it between your legs. It's a really fun one for people to watch you through windows. But yeah, so adjusting and then find the like in between position that just feels good and stable for you. And you can adjust it at any time. Think moving up the body now into what your low back feels like, a little wiggle. So your thoracic spine, that mid spine up behind your ribcage. With your shoulders, give them a couple of rolls, squeeze and relax. And then the one thing I will say is turn your palms so they face forward. They don't have to be like straining. Okay, we don't have just pinkies forward, hands pressed in, just hands face forward. So that like at any time someone could like come along and give you a little low five. All right. Now with your head, give a little shake and stack it up over top of your shoulders. That is your mountain pose or your Tadasana. Okay. We won't always take that long to get into it, but that's like your home base. Another one is forward fold. And this one I really like because the relief I get on my shoulders and neck. It can be problematic for some people though, so let's walk through it. I'm going to turn sideways just so you can see me a little better. You can do it however you wish. So probably about the same distance apart with your feet, but you may have to play with this as well. For your forward fold, there's lots of ways to get down to it. Sometimes people will dive from like a overhead sort of prayer position, they'll dive down. Sometimes people will swan dive, so they'll just separate their hands and dive down. And then some people really like to draw their hands towards their belly and hips to fold down. Okay, so it's really going to depend on kind of what's going on with your clothing, with your body, all that sort of thing. If you feel like there's just like some extra clothing or extra body parts here in the way that you need to move out of the way, then you can put your hands on your hips and that can really help. And you can also widen your stance, right? So if you need to make space for your belly, then you can absolutely do that. You can bend your knees more or less.
The whole idea of it is to release your neck, and your shoulders. That's so that you're not doing this with your head all the time. So just releasing your head. So whatever you need to do that, that's it. I hope you're following along that way. All right, the next one is a halfway lift. And so this one can go with wherever your feet are. So you don't have to adjust your feet. I'm going to, because my feet just are a little bit wider than I like, my knees kind of buckling. So for the halfway lift, you're just gonna slide your hands up your legs to your shins or your upper thigh and come to a flat back. Think of a long neck. So your gaze is gonna be like straight down at your mat. We're not gonna be peeking up. We're not gonna be looking between your legs. We're just looking at the mat. Nice straight back. You can press your bum out a little bit and you might feel a lengthening in your hamstrings. See if you can transition to a forward fold from here. So get back down to releasing the neck and shoulders, bending the knees as much as you like. Good. Now we're going to try to get all the way up to Tadasana, to press into your feet, rise all the way up to stand, sweep your arms up overhead. Big breath in, and as you take your breath out, draw your hands into heart center, and release them down to the sides. Palms face forward. Always able to adjust your feet. You'll see me do it all the time. Into your Tadasana. Ta-da! Lovely. Okay. Let's get started. We're going to do a little bit of a flow practice on these nice stable legs, and then we are going to do some hip mobility work. So coming up to the top of your mat, find your Tadasana. Take a few breaths in and out. Feel the length of your spine as if you're being drawn up by a cord holding up to the ceiling. Draw your hands to your hips. Step back with your right foot, keeping your left foot forward. High on the toe of the right foot. Adjust your hips. Draw right hip forward, left hip back. Lovely. All right. Bend down so you're almost touching your right knee down to the floor and lift up. Do this 2 more times. Landing down and up. Down and up. This time, pressing into your left foot. Step your right foot forward a bit. We're not coming to meet. We're finding our way into warrior one, stepping down. And that way, your heel can land. So right heel has landed on the mat. Right toes might be slightly out towards the top right corner of your mat. And if you've walked in too far or not enough, you can adjust. Check the hips. Right hip draws forward, left hip draws back. Nice and tall through the spine. Maybe feeling quite a stretch in your calf muscle. I am for sure. Awesome. Bend into the left knee, step forward, feet come to meet, find your Tadasana. Breath in. Hands to the hips, root down to the right foot, step back with the left foot, find your lunge, adjust the hips, left hip forward, right hip back, bending down, just touching left knee down to the mat, or maybe not all the way. One more. Beauty. Step the left foot in a little closer so the heel can plant down. Maybe left toes spin out towards top left corner of the mat. Check the hips again. Left hip forward, right hip back. See if you can adjust your pelvis. Remember, we did that tilting with the pelvis. See if you can find that comfortable position, that stacked position. Press into the left heel. Feel the stretch through the calf. Notice if you're holding tension somewhere else. Sometimes when I feel tension in my calf muscle, my jaw takes on some of it to give it relief. Like sympathetic. It's like, oh, you're hurting? I'll hurt with you. That's silly. We don't need to do that. Work it out. All right, root down to the right foot, step forward with the left. Find your Tadasana. I'm gonna move a bit so I don't whack my head on some plants. All right, sweep your hands up overhead.
Your choice. Dive from here, swan dive, where you separate your hands, or draw your hands to your hips. Find your forward fold. Release your neck and shoulders. Slide your hands up onto your shins or your thighs. Find your halfway lift. Release your hands down all the way back to your forward fold. Exhale. Root down through the feet, sweep the hands all the way up, come to stand. Hands meet in the middle, come down to the center as you exhale, release into Tadasana. Palms face forward down at your side. Check your stacking, maybe give it a wiggle. Find your way. Awesome. All right, hands to hips. Stepping back into warrior one this time, so the second one we did. So just a little ways back, heel down on the mat, toes facing top corner, top right corner. Notice how this feels. If you feel a bit wobbly side to side, widen your stance, so like take up more space in the width of your mat, right? If you don't feel that calf stretch anymore, maybe step your right foot back a little further, bend more deeply, adjust those hips. Right hip forward, left hip back. Okay. Pressing into your left foot, step your right foot back a little further, high on the toe now into that crescent lunge. We're not doing the crescent part of the back position right now. We're just staying up really nice and straight. But adjust the hips again, right hip forward, left hip back. Take a moment to notice your left knee. You want to make sure that it is not hovering over its big toe. That is what we call collapsing inward. We don't want that. All right, now here's the fun part. You're going to spin your right toes outward. So the long edge of your foot, the outer edge, is parallel with the short edge of your mat. Finding your way into warrior two. This is one of my favorite standing poses. And then you can get your arms into position. Left hand over right knee, or over left hand over left knee. Check in with that left knee again. Make sure you can see the big toe, or at least that it's not being covered up. Have a look at your right hand. Make sure it's under shoulder height. See if you can shrug up your shoulders and then relax a little bit. Yeah. Awesome. There's your warrior two. All right, we're going to reverse engineer this. Are you ready? So now, turning your left toes face forward. Pause for a minute there. Flip your right toes out. Bend into your right knee, making sure it doesn't track over your left toe. Right toe. Blah, blah, blah. Warrior two on the other side is what we're doing. Can you feel yourself stacked over top of your hips so you're not kind of like tilted either way? Awesome. Okay, now here's the fun part. We've switched what the top of our mat is, right? So the top of our mat is now where our right toe is facing. So you're gonna turn your left toes so that you find that crescent lunge position. I like to bring my hands back to my hips for this part. So you're bending into the right knee. The left leg is nearly straight, but up on the toes. Adjust the hips. Draw left hip forward, right hip back. Beautiful. Now, remember how we stepped it in for our warrior one earlier? We're going to do that again. So step that lunge in a little bit. For warrior one, readjust if it's not quite what you want. Left hip forward, right hip back. Left knee fairly straight. Lengthening those calf muscles. Stay up over top of your hips again. Awesome. There's your warrior one. Take a breath in and out, and step forward to the new top of your mat. Find your way into Tadasana. To that. Okay, let's move through that forward fold bit one more time here. Sweep the hands up overhead. Hands come to meet. You can either dive from here, swan dive, or draw hands to hips. Find your forward fold. Adjust your feet if needed. Release head and neck. Hands slide up to shins or up to upper thighs into your halfway lift. Exhale, back to your forward fold. Inhale as you press all the way up, sweeping your arms up overhead. Hands are under heart center with the breath out. Find your Shavasana.
All right. Shake yourself out of that. Take some water and find your strap.
Got some strap stuff happening now. Okay. Now, I was really tempted to do a lot of this standing with you. I think it'd be really fun to do it standing and lying, but just thinking of time and also the order in which to do things so that it makes sense for the body, we're gonna have to move back down to the mat. So come on back down onto your back. I did promise lots of back work today, so here we are. So come on back onto your back. See what your body needs. Maybe it needs a little wiggle side to side, a little ironing out of the low back. Maybe you want to draw circles with your knees, noticing which part of your back gets massaged when your knees are closer or further. All right. Now, taking your strap, unlooping it, I've got quite a lengthy strap. Root your left foot down on the floor and take the strap and wrap it around like the ball of your right foot. And then press your right heel up towards the ceiling. You can flex your toes back towards your face. Keep a little softness in the right leg, but we want to draw the foot up towards the nose. We're looking for a stretch in the back of the leg. See if you can find it there. Also be aware of the positioning of your shoulders. You can see as if I'm holding up right near my foot and my shoulders draw up. If I hold onto the strap a little closer to the floor, then my shoulders can relax down a little more. We like a little more relaxation in life, so let's let our shoulders relax as best we can. That means moving the hands a little further away from the foot. See if you can send your breath in to stretch. Resisting the urge to bury the tension in your jaw. We're getting a little philosophical here. It's known for many of us how when we're feeling stressed out, we have learned to endure, right? And we sort of pride ourselves on being able to get through anything as humans in this society. And so one of the things we often do is when we're feeling tension, stress, concern, any of those feelings that give us a bit of a tightness, whether it's in our mind or in our world or in our body, we tend to transfer it elsewhere, right? And so a nice example of this is that when I feel a stretch in the back of my leg, I have the urge to clench my jaw, to tighten up my shoulders. Are you having a similar experience? And can you release some of that by using your breath? Using the breath to work through difficult feelings, emotions, sensations. That can be one of the really valuable tools of yoga. And when they talk about living a life of yoga, rather than simply practicing yoga on the mat, that's a bit of what they're talking about. Okay. Bend your right knee. Give yourself a little break from that. Keeping your strap hooked, you can even just kind of bend and flop your leg a little bit. Might feel sort of good. Okay, we're gonna do some more work there, so bear with me. Lengthening that leg out again. Let's see if we can allow it to sweep open a little bit, opening the hip. You may counteract it by letting your left knee drag out to the side a bit. That's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. Just opening the hip a bit, still drawing the toes up towards the face slightly. Now you may be feeling a stretch in your inner thigh of the right leg. That's where I feel it. Might be different for you. These bodies are all different, as you know. Can you do that little scan again?
of those kind of typical hiding places for tension. The temples, the jaw, the hips, the shoulders. Okay, draw your right foot back over top of your body. Lengthen your left leg a bit. You don't have to have it lengthened all the way, but I find it gets in my way if I don't move it. And then we're gonna draw the right leg across the body a bit, crossing over just slightly across the midline. It won't be long before you likely feel something pulling along the outside of your leg. It's likely all the muscles that are attached to your IT band, your iliotibial band. I often think of it as a muscle. It's not. It is not stretchy, but it does connect to a lot of muscles and things like that, and that might be what you feel, that sensation. So people talk about having a tight IT band, and what they actually mean, whether they know it or not, is that many of the muscles that are linked to the IT band are being pulled on by it. And that's because they're tight themselves. Not necessarily a bad thing. Our bodies are adaptive, so they've done that to accommodate something, to help us in some other way. Just like offloading the tension. But it has some uncomfortable consequences. Release out of that. And then maybe release the strap altogether. Give your feet a little shake. Work it out. All right, right foot plants this time. Strap moves around the left foot, around the ball of foot. Nearly straightening the left leg. Draw the toes up towards your nose. Feel that sensation in the back of the left leg this time. Breathing through it. Letting the tension out through your exhales, rather than burying it elsewhere in your body. People talk about the energy in the universe and how it is not infinite, it is finite. There's a certain amount of it, people will say, but that it can move. It can move around. And so we don't need to store so much energy in our body. We can release more of it. And some of the ways people imagine doing it is through the breath. Releasing some energy out that way. Through stretching our muscles and lengthening them. Releasing energy out of them. By movement practice. All moving the energy through. All right, bend the left knee, keeping the foot looped. You can kind of do a little kick up and down. That feels okay for you. And then lengthen it back out. And allow your left hip to open up to the side. Maybe you counter by letting your right knee splay out to the right slightly. Feeling a lot of sensation on the inner thigh for me. Maybe you too. Notice what your shoulders are doing. I'm noticing that I'm really drawing one up. See if I can release it down. Turns out I can. These legs are heavy, you know. Letting go through the breath. And drawing your left foot back towards the midline. I'm going to lengthen my right leg a bit so it gets out of the way. And let the left leg cross the midline this time. Oh, Nelly, that's a lot of sensation. Ooh-wee. Using the breath and also knowing when to back off. So we don't have to fight through anything here. There's always an option to shift out of it or to take a break altogether. Just because I'm leading you and I'm saying go loop this band and do this and do that does not mean you have to listen. If something inside of you is saying, then please listen to that voice. Oh, just got a big release in the hips there. Letting go, rest. See where you can release some tension, release some energy back to the universe. Gently return the foot over top of the body, unhook the foot, and shake the legs out. Oh, that feels good. Okay. You can start to rotate the ankles, choosing how you do it. Maybe they move in unison, maybe it's one at a time, maybe they're in opposite circles. And you can have the wrists match opposite. Extend your feet up towards the ceiling, press the heels up, hands, press up too. And then draw yourself into a ball of sorts, knees towards chest. No need to lift the head if you don't wish to. Moving the feet down onto the mat again. Let's kick the left foot up. Flex the toes, bend the knee, open the hip, rest the outer ankle against the right knee. We're moving into figure four. If you practiced with me before, you probably know this is one of my favorite ways to end a practice before we move into Shavasana. I love to stretch the glutes. So since you have your strap available, feel free to use it. Going through stepwise though, looking at how things are feeling in your hips and your glutes. Take your left hand and press your left knees away slightly from the body. Notice how that feels. Likely you're going to feel stretching to your left glutes, since your left leg is the one that's crossed, like it's doing the crossing. Pausing here. If you'd like to go a little deeper, you can try adding a block beneath your right foot. And again, you press the left knee away. Notice how that feels. If you need more of a stretch, although I feel pretty good here, but I will walk you through it. If you want more of a stretch, you can lace your hands through around your right thigh and draw your right knee closer to your right shoulder, or you can accomplish the same thing with a strap, which might be a better idea because it means that your shoulders rest back a little more. You can draw the right knee towards the right shoulder. You can still have a spare hand to press the left knee away if you like. All of those options are on the table. Some people like to kick the support of my high. I get less sensation when I do that because the way my body works, and so you won't see me doing that option, but it is an option that is available to you. Notice if you're loading tension elsewhere in the body. See if you can release some of that. If you have your right leg lifted, lower it down. If it's on a block, you can remove the block. Uncross the leg. And let your heel toe your feet out nice and wide to the width of your mat, perhaps. And you can windshield wipe your knees from side to side, massaging your hips and your glutes. Above this, I've got a strap here in the waist still, and all looped around. Awesome. Get your props ready for the other side, remembering that this side may feel different. So even if the block thing wasn't needed for you on the right side, it might be needed on this side, so we'll see. Kick your right foot nice and high. Bend the knee, open the hip, right ankle against the top of your left thigh. Press the knee away. Notice how that feels. Feel the sensation already tight around the outside of the hip there. If you want to go deeper, you could add a block beneath your left foot. And you can still press the right knee away. Another option is to thread the arms or the strap through around the left thigh and draw the left thigh towards left shoulder. Again, option to press the right knee away with a free hand if you have it. Notice where that tension is being shared in the body. And rather than shoving it back into stretching muscles, see if you can release it to the atmosphere around you. This whole principle of moving energy out of the body really resonates with me around difficult emotions and feelings. For me, it manifests when my kids are having a hard time with something and I can't help them. There's those times when they are just having a moment, a freak out sometimes. I think of it in my head. Maybe that's not the nicest way to think of it, but they're having a moment with rough emotions. Maybe they're yelling at me or saying nasty things or just kind of eye rolling and giving a lot of attitude. And in those times where I have that pent up, difficult energy inside of me, those are the times where I kind of take it personally and I react and I have a hard time with it. Whereas those times when I've been able to move some more of that energy, I am able to let that energy flow through me and out of me too. So when they're kind of yelling at me, I can see it for what it is, that they're just releasing that hard energy and then I don't have to absorb it. But if I'm in the business of collecting all the difficult energy, instead of moving out of myself, then I tend to collect inside of me. And that ends up in all sorts of ugly ways, right? Of reacting or like bottling it up and getting through, and then ultimately just feeling lousy afterwards, right? Maybe I get grumpy as a result, or maybe I don't react the way I wish I could have and feel regret and all these things. And those things are going to happen no matter what. But what I found is that happens less often when I can release some of that energy. And so we're practicing releasing that energy out. And hopefully it will help you as you practice it. It'll become more innate so that more often that will be the one you can choose in those difficult times. I will say it won't work 100% of the time though, so be prepared to still feel tough feelings. All right, release out of this. We've been here for a while and talking lots again, coming out of it. Windshield wipe those legs from side to side because that just feels awesome. If it doesn't for you, do something that does. Nothing more. Massage those hips. And then find your way into your final resting pose. I love to finish the Shavasana. If you do, please join me. If there's another pose that you like to end with, do that. Do what feels best for you. If you're joining me in Shavasana, maybe try a little something with me, a little bit of progressive relaxation. Just gonna ball your fists up, scrunch your face up, point your toes, like flex your belly, flex your bum, tighten up all the way. Hold it there for 3, 2, 1, and release. We're gonna do it one more time, just in case that wasn't a great run for you. All right, so tighten everything up, ball everything, toes, face, bum, belly, arms, fists, everything super tight, scrunch your face, hold for 3, 2, 1. And just float. I'll give you a little figurative tap on the shoulder in a moment. And it's time to come back to reality.
start to draw some of that energy back into the body. Maybe using some light from your soul to fill up all the cavities, all the little spaces in your physical body, lighting it up from the inside. Wiggle the fingers and toes. Take full breaths, fill up with light. Gradually increase the size of your movements, maybe moving ankles and wrists, arms and legs. Keeping eyes closed or fluttering them open if they've been closed. Maybe take a full body stretch, reaching hands overhead, toes zip together, stretching as long as you can, and exhaling for open mouth. Sinking back in. Draw your feet to the floor, and you can roll into a ball if you like, taking one last wiggle side to side. Perhaps rolling over to one side or rock and rolling up to seated. Finding your way into a comfortable seated position, knowing that we won't be here long, so don't worry if seated is not your best or your favorite. Certainly not mine. I'd rather stand or lay down any day. Here we are, sitting up nice and tall, envisioning that same length that we talked about at the very beginning of the practice. Sitting up through the pelvis, tall through the spine. Take a breath in, sweep your hands overhead. Thumbs meet overhead, drawing your breath into your body. And exhaling. Take your hands and rub them together, create some heat, and place them over your heart. Thank you for joining me for our practice today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I wish you well.